Showbiz. Let's hold it.
Thank God for me this
Showbiz.
Okay, cool, I got it. Thank you. Physical comedy is my specialty. A couple weeks ago, when I came home from work, my wife showed me a note that our 6-year-old daughter had written. Her spelling is pretty atrocious, and the punctuation was non-existent, but with a little help, I was able to decipher it. I love you, Mommy. I wish you didn't have to die, but everyone has to die. I know you were 42. While in my 6-year-old's mind, my wife lingers at death's door, she doesn't seem as concerned for me. I suspect that part of this could be because she might like my wife more, but also because she imagines her as considerably older. Once, when my wife forgot something, my daughter confided that Mommy's memory wasn't as good as mine because of her age. My wife is exactly 2 days older than me, which of course should mean that I am also circling the drain. I've been considering my mortality lately, not like in a preoccupying, death-haunted way, but I think more often than I'd like to about the fact that, statistically speaking, I've probably crossed the halfway mark. Of course, I have managed to obey the biological imperative to reproduce myself, twice even, so at least there will be some of my genetic legacy out there in the future. Or, you know, in theory there will. See, I recently rewatched the movie Children of Men for the first time since it was in theaters. When I first saw it, I found it unsettling, a glimpse of a bleak potential future where Britain cuts itself off from Europe and a broader world reeling under the effects of widespread environmental destruction, and desperate refugees fleeing extinction face hate and imprisonment. Phew, I thought, good thing that was just speculative. Of course, watching it now, it was literally gut-churning. Granted, some of that was the fact that during the movie I was drinking all the prep solution for a colonoscopy, and knew that for the next few hours I would be experiencing my own very localized ecological collapse. But that was only part of it. I read an article last week. Actually, I read a lot of articles last week as our host sent out some background information to help us all prepare for tonight's show. You know, hey guys, Rachel here. Here's how we're all going to die and our species is going to be wiped out. Make it funny. But I read one particular article on climate denialism, not the kind you're thinking. Climate change is a hoax. I had to put on a jacket today, so much for global warming, LOL. Because, you know, fuck those people, right? But this was about what I think a lot of us are somewhat guilty of, the kind where we've done our best not to think about just how serious it's going to be. A denial of what even the most optimistic projections are likely to mean for us. And to quote noted scientific authority and soul brother #1, James Brown, people, it's bad. I would go into detail about just how bad, but that would require me rereading the article and doing some follow-up research, and that would violate my current policy, RE, the impending consequences of climate change, which is somewhere along the lines of la 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 la. I mean, I've been aware of climate change since, I don't know, junior high, shit, the late 80s, the early 90s. I've known it was a problem, you know, melting ice caps. I mean, that's bad, right? But it wasn't because I was necessarily super scared. I like to think it was because I just had a decent sense of environmental responsibility. I named my dog Ranger Rick after the anthropomorphic raccoon mascot of the World Wildlife Federation. I went to a hippie environmental camp where we were encouraged to eat not just the apple, but the core as well to cut down on waste. I picked up litter. I recycled. Also, I grew up in a mill town where much of the local economy was tied to belching smokestacks in a polluted river, so it wasn't hard to feel smugly superior by comparison. Messing up the earth just seemed like a really immoral thing to do, but the thought of it bummed me out more than it frightened me. Now, I'm terrified, and that's even when I'm not digging into the details of just how horrific things are likely to be. After reading everything I did last week, I really want to talk to my therapist about it. But he just quit doing private practice, so now I have to talk to you guys. Although, seems like it could be a lot of co-pays. You guys take United Health, right? My therapist would always do this thing when he'd take my credit card at the end of the session. He would go out into the hallway to swipe it with his phone and then step back into his office when he was done. There was no readily apparent reason to do this, but I came to understand that this was a symbolic way to put a wall between the treating my depression side and the taking my money side of his one-man operation. There's a metaphor there, I'm pretty sure, something about separating what we've come to rely upon from its cost in a self-deceiving way to avoid acknowledging that one is entirely dependent upon the other. Maybe you're living off the grid using a biofuel made from, I don't know, your own nail clippings, eating apples, core and all, but for most of us, just merely by dint of being denizens of the first world in the early 21st century, we've racked up a toll, and it's going to start coming due in our lifetimes and our children's. Obviously, I'm concerned about the planet, and I don't want it to be destroyed because, I have a house there, and the Earth is really convenient to a lot of things I go to. Certainly, I'm worried about the future of the world as a whole, but mostly I'm terrified for my kids. I know that's selfish. I know that might seem like whenever Donald Trump bragged about grabbing pussy and Republicans were all, I have a daughter, so I am horrified, at least for 5 minutes before they all fell back in line, as if to say, this affects me only insofar as it directly relates to me. But I'm sorry, I don't want my kids to spend the remainder of their lives in a world accelerating toward cataclysm. Isn't that the fondest hope that every parent has for their children? Or I guess really just sort of the base level hope? Some other species' offspring will do okay, I suppose. In my reading, I came across an article about creatures that are projected to benefit from a changing Earth. Among these is a tiny nondescript bird that doesn't breed so well during cooler periods. Known as the long-tailed tit, this little fellow, really, we're all adults. Known as the long-tailed tit, this little fellow is expected to thrive as the climate warms. This, of course, caused me to imagine a scenario where a lost SpaceX capsule returns to a strange planet ruled by tits, who dominate the meek and subservient remnants of humanity they have driven into the wilderness. Eventually, the space astronaut comes upon the half-submerged ruin of our own lost civilization and shakes his fist at the heavens, screaming, "You maniacs, you blew it up!" Or really just let things sort of slowly but certainly change until the pace accelerated to a terrifying extent that you were so used to ignoring imminent catastrophe that you refused to acknowledge what was readily evident around. You know what? That's too complicated. You blew it up. So, while on its face, I'm sure Elon Musk would find the phrase "planet of the tits" very appealing, I can assure you, my friends, that it will not be. When I sat down to watch Children of Men lately, in my mind, it was still a relatively recent movie, but it came out 12 years ago. Scientists estimate that we have less than that to turn away from a course of events that will one day leave Earth uninhabitable by humans. Less than a dozen years to steer towards something slightly better than the worst projected scenario. 12 years. My little girls will only be 22 and 18 there. I'm not throwing out these numbers just to impress you science people with my ability to do math. I'm mostly saying it out loud for myself because I can hardly believe the immediacy. I've tried to impress upon my kids the importance of not being wasteful with our resources, saying encouraging and I hope thought-provoking things like, "God damn it, kid, it's time to get out of the shower," and "Who the fuck left all these lights on?" My wife is here tonight, and I'm sure she would like me to make it clear to you all that I don't actually curse at my children. But feel-good measures like recycling, driving a Prius, meatless Mondays, and maybe not leaving all the fucking lights on in the house just for once, goddamn, can take us only so far. Choke down all the apple cores you want, but any effort to stave off complete and total ruin will require widespread, systemic, sometimes uncomfortable change at the governmental, commercial, and societal levels. Earlier today, completely apropos of nothing, the 6-year-old said to me, "No remorse." I had no idea what this was a reference to. Possibly leaving all the lights on, but I like to think that in terms of the future, it means that she is the sort who is going to be willing to do whatever it takes. What momentum we've seen lately, the push for the Green New Deal, for instance, or yesterday's youth climate strike. Seems like a last best chance, the desperate heaving of the ball from half court as the buzzer sounds. As you might guess, since I'm reading an essay at a nerdy variety show at a science festival, I haven't willingly watched a basketball game in about 20 years. But I understand that that is a thing. And I hope we can do more than hold our breath, afraid to look to see if we can make it. Thank you.